Generally Famous, proudly brought to you by Oppo's first flip phone, the Find N2 Flip. Generally famous for looking great and folding small to fit anywhere. Kia ora Aotearoa and welcome to Generally Famous. I'm Simon Bridges and every week I talk to generally famous but always interesting guests about life, love and what makes them tick. Today's guest is former cricketing great, successful Kiwi entrepreneur with skincare brand Triumph and Disaster, husband and father, Dion Nash. Hey, it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Simon. Awesome to be here.
Hey, now look, I'm not going to turn this into a tragic cricket podcast because there's actually a surprising number of those. But let's start with cricket. Let's not get it out of the way, but get it out of the way. 1992 to 2002.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, that sounds right.
Actually, the thing I thought about that is it's a long time ago.
Yes, it is, and it increasingly feels so. But well, it's weird. It does and it doesn't. It feels like another lifetime, but it also is right there, always in the background. So
yeah, I think I can understand that. And if you were out right now playing in the latest T20 or something, would you be? How do you think you'd go?
Yeah, so often you ponder that, don't you? The best way I've ever been, I think, I went to a friend's wedding, one of my best mates, and he got married in Jamaica of all places, and his father introduced me as one of the best players of my generation. And I've pondered on that for a long time because I've often wondered how I should refer to where I was. And that's probably how I think sums it up the best, you know, like you are only part of your generation of cricketers, not the ones that preceded you, not the ones that come after you. And so you can only play and be the best of that group. That's the environment you're in, that's the nature of the game and the teams that you play against. So I've always sort of thought that was the best way I've ever heard it referred to. You know?
That sort of makes you sound a bit old.
It does, it does. But in terms of answering your question more around one of those better players in any generation, I think you always have that slight feeling that you would have made it in whichever generation, and you would have just had to adjust to the nature of the game, the nature of the rules, the nature of the competition that was around you. And I think the sort of the better players always would make it in each generation, and that applies not just to me, but to all of the players that end up being good players.
Presume you, maybe not, because maybe you're out there doing stuff and going at it, but I presume you'd be a bit rusty though. And would
yes,
you? Or?
Definitely rusty now.
Yeah.
No, hips are gone, But also a bit of will is gone, you know. Like yes. Once you break, and I think that's the hardest thing. Like, you know, once you break the connection, that the thing that I used to live and breathe, I could sniff out a game of cricket within about 100-mile radius. You know,
you could smell it.
It's just like, certainly growing up, and now it's just one of those things where, you know, if it's on the TV and I walk into the room, I'll stop and watch for a while. But I would never now go and the cricket's on, I must go and watch it. That's not in my frame.
People find this somewhat hard to believe, but no, actually this is my experience of most politicians. I've not watched Parliament since. I couldn't give a monkeys because I'm not there.
Yeah.
So who cares, right? And it's also just not, like, it's not that relevant to anything really, you know,
yes.
unless you sort of, so if someone's happened to be, if I'm flicking through the channels at 9:45 at night and there's still 15 minutes of Parliament because it goes till 10 o'clock at night, I might stop and say, oh, yeah. She's great, or he's a Burke, or,
Does your blood still boil in that 15 minutes?
Oh, it can. and I'm probably guilty of, I would do that so much better. That would be a real, I would. But what about, though, with cricket, though, in terms of that time distance, 20 years, is it a different game? What I mean is, like, if you take, say, tennis, I would have thought, and you can tell I'm not an elite athlete or sports person, but or track and field, they are quite different than they were, you know, back in the past.
I would say cricket of all of the sports has probably changed the most, and that's the impact of T20. And also, I think, the improvement in technology around the wickets, the conditions that they play on. You know, you'd never get tired wickets now, and that's a specific cricket knowledge thing. But like basically, because you're playing on a turf wicket, the longer the game goes on, if that wicket is not really perfectly prepared, it will tire and it becomes harder and changes the nature of how you play on it.
Yes.
And that has a huge impact on the game and the outcome of the game. Whereas now you've just got these really solid blocks of turf which don't change. In fact, they just get better really as the game goes on, which allows batters just to blast and play the game.
Does that, in a nostalgic sense, do you regret that because it takes away a sort of a feel and a skill and a mind aspect to it all?
Yes, I do. But I would say there's a whole generational gap of Gen Zers maybe who just have never seen that side of it, and so they don't even
Dion
understand
looks
it.
Knowingly around the room at everyone else in this room who wasn't born when he last played cricket, which is somewhat true. I don't know, it might be a bit. Actually, I think they're nodding. It is true. Isn't that amazing?
But yeah, it is. But I think though that you've got this very much this divide between now and then, pre-T20 and post, and there's probably a little people in the middle who remember both, and now you've got people who don't remember the old way. And so like if I watch YouTube, I'll go and watch the West Indian bowlers of the 80s, and the people I watched growing up, and Richard Hadley and Imran Khan and people like that, and that I still love that because that to me is cricket, how I loved it and fell in love with it. Watching guys blast T20, that's a whole nother game, and it's a whole nother group of people who have that fan to it. But to me, something has been taken away from the game. Yeah. Some of the character perhaps. But I'm clearly aware of how much of an old,
You're like, mate, you're a traditionalist, and I think on these things, and I'm not going to go on about politics, I promise you, but actually you'd be surprised in a way that same sort of phenomenon you're talking about has happened in politics. The way you go back, even when I first went to Parliament, which was 2008, not that long ago, but people had to get up and give rowdy tub thumpers without notes because they were the rules, right? So the style, if you think about that, I'm nostalgic for that style. I think it's a great art, right? This kind of, whereas today it's kind of everyone's got a piece of paper in front of them and it's
yes,
and in fact, so I was feeling like a dinosaur by the end because I want to go in and raise the roof of the place, right? And it's kind of like, and the new MPs are sort of there thinking a bit sort of squiffy at you, right? So but it is what it is now.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. You can't change it, so you just, I guess, move into a realm of doing podcasts.
And you exactly.
Businesses.
Where am I going to shout at you? No, I'm not. I know, actually, I think I know. You would say, and this is the traditionalist kind of position as well, that the test cricket is the ultimate game, and the rest is kind of certainly T20 level. That's sort of the pretenders now, but.
Well, I think it's, yes.
You once described, let me give you, it's like 2020 is like cheap takeaway food, not even good takeaway food, end quote.
Is that what I said?
That's what I got from...
Yeah, good, okay. Well, I mean, I think that's probably still... it's probably better takeaway food now. I think, and it's the type of food that's...
Uber Eats from some...
It's Uber Eats, yeah.
Thai restaurant.
But it has improved the longer form. But also, I think you have to look at the technology around. I mean, that's something that doesn't really get spoken about. But, the fact that you can score 400 to win a test on the last day now, that in the past, I would argue, was virtually impossible because of the nature of the wickets and how they degraded. So to now be still able to bat and score that amount of runs on the last day, for example, to win a test match, a large part of that, in my view, comes down to the technology and the increase in sort of conditions or the improvement in conditions around the game, which you got to take your head off. That's great, but it definitely has had an impact. And I think, I just look at the better batsmen in the world now. Back when Viv Richards or Martin Crowe, their averages were, if they averaged in the early 40s, they were considered, or mid 40s, they were considered great players. Yes. Now people are averaging 55, 60. Yep. And I think that's got to be down to conditions as much as talent.
Yes. No, I'm sure you're right. And that's right. I mean, even at the technology of the bats and so on, right? I mean, everything's... your greatest success, if you think about don't be immodest. I mean, if you sort of think about your cricket career, what would you say I'm really proud of?
Yeah, that? Well, I had a big game at Lords early on, and that was but I would consider that was like, I've often said it's like there's a great Charlie Brown quote, what's something like along the lines of, there's no heavier burden in the world than a great potential, and and he sort of he's hanging there with his shoulders drooped, and but that's true as a young sports person. You make the team, and then you've got to get that monkey off your back, and so that performance for me was that I got the monkey off my back, and I was like, actually, personally, I realised I belong. I'm good enough,
Yes.
And so you ride that high, and that gets you in, and everyone accepts you, and the senior players bring you in, and all of a sudden your life changes within that unit, and even against opposition. But in terms of the thing I take away from the game would be that tour of '99 when we went to England, and I didn't have that one big performance like that. I had a really great tour, did lots of great things on the tour, but more was part of a successful team that really played to its potential. And I would say if I hadn't had that tour to finish my bookend my career, I don't think I would feel that I'd had a very good career. I think that achievement as a group of players stands out in my mind as something that because I feel I was very much part of that, but also so it sort of got the group out, got us all out sharing and working as a unit and understanding what was required to win, which again was sort of a sense of getting a monkey off our back, and I think that's the one I take away the most from.
Got a significant or biggest regret, or?
Oh yeah, it's sort of a dual thing. Like I just because of the timing, I think I liked to play with a sense of how would I say it? I played with my heart on my sleeve.
Yes.
And that helped, but it also made me probably make some decisions that around playing slightly injured or trying to play for the team.
Yes.
And that shortened my career. So I think if I go back, I would do the same thing again. So I can't change it. But to say that I don't have some regrets around maybe being a bit more career focused on having more longevity in the game, but you can't have both. So to me, that's just a double-edged sword.
No, I understand. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. You got any current involvement in cricket?
I coach my 16-year-old son's cricket team, much to his chagrin. What else?
Are they any good?
I think he.
Be careful what you say.
Yeah, no, both my sons have got some very, very much some natural talent at the game. But
I hope so.
Yeah, but the thing that I say to lots of parents is, I think the thing that if I defined what was different about me growing up and say when I was coming through, that undefinable character was, I think, it's sort of an ugly word in New Zealand, but ambition, unbridled ambition that maybe doesn't fully describe what it is, but is probably the closest thing I can think of. That's the thing that made me stand out. Like I literally was...
And do you feel that we're lacking that today at a
No,
level?
I think any player who makes it to the New Zealand team, like Kane Williamson, we might not see it when we look at him, but or Trent Bolt or anybody. The thing that got them there is ambition. Like a guy like Mitchell, who's sort of come from nowhere and got there a little bit later. He's probably a more visible example to me. That ambition is what got him through and kept them sticking at it, and there's that drive to get there. And I think that when I look at all talented young kids, there's heaps of talented young kids, but probably the defining character, if it's not there, an internal ambition. I'm not talking about parents' ambition. No. My parents had no real ambitions for me to do it.
Neither did mine.
Yeah, and it was like, I think parents' ambition is almost the opposite of what's required. It's got to be all led by the kid.
Sometimes get in the way, actually, and make the kid sort of resist it. And it's I made the mistake once early on in my parliamentary career of in an interview saying that I was ambitious, and it stuck around for a couple of years, right? Like it was a terrible thing. I mean, I was ambitious, It was ultimately why I went to...
I think I vaguely recall that, actually.
But it is a dirty word.
Beaten. Yeah.
You're not allowed to sort of say that, even though...
Well, I think...
to me, that's a Kiwi character flaw, actually.
I would say it comes close to that. Yeah, I think the other part about it is, which I would not force upon a young person, is if they don't have it, to try to force it into them, because ambition, as I've experienced it,
Yes.
is not an easy beast to handle. You know, it doesn't fit well into New Zealand society and growing up and being good natured and a good team member, or doing the right things at the right times in a certain environment. You know, it's actually quite often the thing that drives you to say the thing you shouldn't say, or to be abrupt when you should have been more polite or calm. So there's lots of those things which, if you are not a character that can withstand some of that beating up, or some of that, even if it's just internal beating up, you know, knowing walking away that you did something really in the wrong thing, but it was driven by that internal desire for whatever you're trying to do. That, you know, if you're not strong enough to understand and have those lessons, that it's not for you. You know.
Well, I think ambition's what keeps you going in the hard times at a level, right? It's that sort of, as you say, internal driving force. Interesting what you say about parents, though, right? I mean, of course, there are many, if I think about it, and I haven't prior to this, but significant sporting stars where, look, it was that parental drive, probably like I mean, they probably had a lot of internal drive as well themselves, but the Williams sisters in tennis, or, you know, whether the parents there really pushing it. So it's, how are you with your children, briefly on that? Are you kind of live and let live, do what you want, or are you like, no, I want you at cricket?
No, I'm probably terrible. My wife's really good. My wife's got it nailed. I'm the shocker, because because I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm not trying to get my kids to have ambition, but if I see something unfair, or if I see another group of parents that I perceive are influencing the game, I can't help but voice that, which can come across as me trying to, you know, but what I see happening, is, you know, quite often is, you know, there's just, if you're playing a very well organised team of cricket, they'll have, you know, an umpire, a coach, a manager, a whole sideline, and you feel like you're playing the team plus the entourage, you know, and things like that. So, you know, it's very hard to sit in silence and be the demure, perfect coach or father, I think, in that environment. And I think that happens a lot, not just for me, but for most sidelines, you know.
Heap of sideline parents. Final kind of question directly on cricket. And you've sort of answered it, and we've talked about, you know, the merits of old school, new school, all that. But, I mean, some general observations on the state of cricket today?
I think it's healthy in the sense that the modern game and its fan base is healthy. I think it's lost some connection to its past for me, which may just be a moment in time. It might get re-established, and maybe that's part of it. I think that for me, the game still has some evolving to do. I think the people the game is the sum of its parts, and I think at the moment there's a whole lot of batters who had to face the West Indian bowlers in the 80s who are now in charge of cricket, and I think you've also got a massive Indian influence, and Indians love batting. That's the nature of the game. The cricket is very batting dominated in India, always has been. And I think when you get all of those people making all of the rules and all of the changes, the outcomes aren't that surprising, that you've got a very batting dominated game.
Yes.
Whereas for me, the game, you know, I loved watching the fear. I loved watching batters bat for 2 hours with their life on the line, literally facing the West Indians and overcoming it. You know, it was just courage at its most pure for me. Mm-hmm. And yet watching a fast bowler tear through a side at the same time was just exciting and got my blood pumping, you know. So the things that I loved, I don't quite see in the game anymore, but I think the game is healthy for sure. I just hope that maybe we can...
Sustainable more than, and as you say, India's a massive part of that, but lost some of the... I don't know if it's quite the right word, but romance or the
Well, I mean, I think some of those athletes
poetry
out there who really want to, you know, like we want to get fast bowlers bowling and you know, those types of athletes back into the game. I think there's a room for improvement, but
You are. We've already said you. I was going to say you're an old bastard. That's not fair. But it's been a while. But in the public eye, when you're walking down the street, are you always the famous cricketer?
It's becoming more increasingly awkward because sometimes you're not sure whether people recognise you or they're just asking for directions. No, I think. Look, it's a hard thing to shake, right? What I find now is I'm in business and I'm trying to do other things, and the things that stimulate me are no longer really in the thing I used to be well known for. So I find it. It's a little bit like being the youngest child in a family. You can as you age, the impact of your argument never increases with your older siblings because you're still always the youngest. And I think it's the same thing with cricket. I'm always a cricketer first in everyone's eyes. So therefore, any knowledge I might have or argument that you bring to the table, I sometimes feel a little bit like I want to forget about cricket or move on from it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I loved it, and I love everything it gave me. So I can't. So I just have to grin and bear it. And
take the good with the bad.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'd much rather have it as something I did than not.
Yeah, I understand the feeling. By the way, I wanted to put something in here that may or may not be relevant to anything we discuss. Dion and I are both the youngest of 6 children. And that's why we are such flawless, characterful people of great excellence or something. I don't know.
Just ask our older brothers and sisters.
Yeah, exactly. And it's on that sort of in the public eye thing. How's the cricketing career and profile affected your life today? And let me answer it for you, and then you see if I would say, well, it's good with the bad, like you say. In the end, because you're going on to do these really cool things, and we're going to talk about them, and all credit to you, it's got to have helped that, hasn't it? Because you are Dion Nash.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And I think the thing that it's helped on a couple of levels. One really fundamental level, I think, is I gained my true self-confidence from playing a sport at an elite level. So the thing that ticked over, and it had that 11 wickets at Lords, fundamentally a shift happened internally, and I was just, I have confidence.
Isn't that amazing?
And I think through cricket I got that. And that was, when you come from a small town in New Zealand, you really fight your way through every stage to get all the way through. Even just coming to school in Auckland, I had to overcome the big deal. Everything's a big deal. Everything's a new big experience. And so that having that on the international stage, I think, really was a fundamental shift. I think having played a career and then stepping out of that and having renown and people who follow cricket know me and acknowledge that success, just gave me a level of confidence, which meant that I thought I could try other things. I could pick up and ask people. I could approach people, all those types of things. And I think that fundamental thing, which I probably would never have had without cricket, like I might have earned them in another way somehow or arrived there. I don't know. That's just my journey was through that to get to that level of self-confidence. But I think that fundamental, I couldn't have had without cricket, not the way I've got. You
got confidence. I would suggest the other thing you got, which I'll acknowledge probably against my own interest to say this, but if I think about my political career and what it does do one way or another, sort of for a time makes you a household name for good or bad, right?
Yeah.
Is it does give you access,
yes.
right? So I know with reasonable confidence if I ring up X or Y, they're going to see me. Yeah. They may not want to, but they will see me because in the end, I don't know, it's a thing there, right? And I presume that's for you and your business, that's also true. It's like, well, hey, it's Dion Nash. That's a bit interesting. Yeah, remember Dion? Yeah. Remember that amazing sort of go at Lords and, da-da-da-da. So is that fair?
Yes, it is. Yep. And I'm grateful for it, I think the only thing I would say is I think there's a saying in cricket, a Cavalier player when I was growing up. He was a millionaire cricketer, and what that meant was he had $1 million in the bank, so he didn't care whether he got out or not. So that Cavalier, and I think that the thing I would say is if I could impart any knowledge or any advice is I think that's the only way to play.
Yeah.
And not just in cricket, I mean, just generally.
Yes.
And so that gives you that false confidence almost to go and just approach your own, because it's no different, right? And if they can only say no.
Totally right.
Yeah.
Are you forced to think about cricket every day because you're Dion Nash?
No, I'm forced to think about how to make my business survive and thrive. That's what ultimately all day, every day now is that. If I have a nightmare once every 6 months, it's usually a cricket nightmare of shit, I should have got more wickets, It's like, how did I not average more, It's like all those types of things. But that's they've waned. They used to be more regular. They've started to subside now. Now it's more about P&Ls and spreadsheets. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, how sexy is that? Well, it is, because there's money attached to it at the end. I'm incredibly excited to be opening my brand spanking new, never looked at before Oppo Find N2 Flip. It's got some beautiful paper it's wrapped in, all very sustainable. I'm unwrapping it. It tells me I've got inspiration ahead, and I believe it. I can tell already it's highly portable. That fold technology, flexion hinge, is amazing. The smoothness of that fold, it's going to fit into the smallest of places. I also know from my little research on this, great battery, great 44 watt super fast charging in fact. So that means all in all, fashion, portable, get me through my day faster. Check them out online at oppo.com/nz. You're now a really successful entrepreneur. I want to talk to that. Final sort of, in a sense, cricket-related question, that's not a cricket-related question on that, though, is do people now come up to you and say, oh, it's Dion Nash, triumph and disaster. That's who Dion Nash is.
Yes, yeah, that definitely. And I it's funny, I worked with Jeff Ross at 42 Below. That was sort of my intro into business, I think, and those guys, Grant Baker and those guys. And I always remember when Jeff sold his business, one of the things I remember we'd had obviously lots of drinks and things at different times when he sold it, because it was quite a long drawn out sales process
too, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So and so I remember being out with him and sort of saying, why did you sell it? It's such a good brand, and he goes, I sort of just got sick of being the vodka guy, and it was I always remember that and thinking, but whatever you do, and I guess the more high profile you make it, and I've used my profile early on, particularly with Triumph Disaster, to get it out there. So again, I'm not complaining, but you just become the vodka guy or the skincare guy or the cricketer, and I think that's part and parcel of it. But internally, I guess you have to just accept that and smile with it rather than fight it, because you can't do anything about it.
And in terms of your job history, obviously, the entrepreneurial things. So there was Springwater, you've been Charlie's. I'm taking it, I could be wrong on this, you didn't have ownership stakes in those, you were a worker bee.
Yeah, no, so with 42 Below, I met Shane, and it was one of the partners, and I went to the same gym as him, and I remember being in Friday afternoon, and I just retired from cricket recently, and I was working doing a bit of media, working for TV3, doing some stuff, and I was in a little bit of a loose end, basically unemployed. And I was in this gym, and I ran into Shane, who was one of the partners, and he goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" And my father had found a spring on his farm up north, like this little Springwater thing. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to do Springwater." And he goes, "Oh, we want to do Springwater. We sell vodka into bars. You should come and talk to us." And he said, "Why don't you bring your business plan in on Monday?" And I was like, "Yeah, no worries, Shane. I'll see you Monday." And I was like, went home, split the bed, and I was like, shit, what's a business plan? And I had to write this thing over the weekend. Anyway, turn up to this meeting with Shane on Monday and walk in, and hand it over. He sort of flicks through the 3 or 4 pages and takes one look and goes, okay, well, why don't we start again? And and then you can come and meet the guys.
Well, at least you try.
Yeah, that's right. So so they were very generous actually. So we set up a water business with 42 Below, and I had 25% stake of that business.
Right.
And obviously I bought some shares into 42 Below, and that was business 101. It was a great entree. And so you talk about access. That was access to business entrepreneurs in the moment doing it, and so that was like I was just like a sponge. I walked into those offices and rooms, and it was sexy on the outside and totally unsexy on the inside. Old offices, 3 to a room, just everyone going for it, and it was so stimulating though. Like I remember sitting in the room with a guy, Mark Richardson, and Todd Graydon. So Mark Richardson, not the cricketer, but another guy, Mark Richardson, and they were just these hardcore sales guys. And I remember sitting in there, and by 10 o'clock on any given day, they'd come up with 5 or 6 business ideas. It was just this environment of like young entrepreneurial guys trying stuff. And both of those guys are now out doing their own thing. They're very successful guys in their own right. But anyway, so it was a great environment to come from sport, where and I always say in sport, the difference in sport is everything comes to you once you're well known. So you're not, and if anything, you're creating a barrier to stop people get to you, so that you can maintain a mental space.
Yes.
Whereas in business, it's sort of the opposite. Nothing comes to you. You've got to go and get everything. So you're out.
It's a really interesting observation. Yeah.
And so breaking that down was really hard. And what the 42 Below guys did is they put me on corporate sales for 4 months leading to Christmas. And if you ever want to have your pride broken, go and try selling 12 bottles of vodka to a guy in a corporate in South Auckland somewhere or on the North Shore who didn't really think much of you when you played cricket anyway, but now he's managed to get you sitting opposite the room, and he can say yes or no to the 12 bottles of vodka. And so you do your 15-minute pitch, and then at the end of it he goes, you know what, nah. And so it was just like this really hardcore sales lesson of like, shit, this is not easy.
Had you done any business prior to getting into that game?
No. I think in sport what you pick up is brand and marketing.
Yes.
I think that side you get a lot of that, but the sales side, the opposite of it.
And if there hadn't been cricket for you, do you reckon you would have inevitably gone into business, or do you think that sort of just kind of, what were we, or was it going to be Mr. Nash, school teacher?
I was
social studies.
The things I was good at, I was good at writing, so English and art and sport. So I would have been maybe journalism, maybe flunked out artist. I don't know. Definitely not business. I don't think. My father. We had a sawmill and farm, and so Dad was a hard-working, salt of the earth
Kiwi,
yeah. So
backbone of the economy.
I remember I used to have to go and work in the sawmill, so I knew that wasn't my future. That's for sure. I was like, I did that from about 15 through to about 18. And I was like, man, just get me the hell out of here.
How triumph and disaster come about?
It came about through, because after 42 Below, I stayed on with Bacardi. They bought it. So I did 3 years with the guys, and then they sold to Bacardi. Then I stayed on and became, through sort of various degrees of sort of subterfuge and BS, I managed to become the marketing director under Bacardi, right? I remember sitting in a room in Miami with all these heads of marketing for the different brands under Bacardi, and they'd all had double MBAs, and stuff. And I was going around, and I had a BA in art history, and I just remember thinking, please don't ask where my MBA's from. I was thinking I'd just slur my Kiwi accent, BA art history or something, So it was definitely, I had a role I probably didn't.
Did they have any? But you top cricketer. Did that mean anything to them?
So
they had to sort of. I don't know. Could they Google you back then?
Yeah, no, they could Google me, but they'd often. It's amazing how often they'd call me an All Black, which was I didn't correct. But yeah. Anyway, so going from there, basically what happened was after 4 years, they asked me to move to London, and I'd actually virtually signed a contract. I'd moved to London, found a flat. And I just thought, you know what? This is history repeating. I can't move a young family and everyone up to London. And I'll be just on a plane the whole time, flying all around the world, and Bernie will be left here with a young family, and it just felt like it wasn't the right next move, so we just decided to take redundancy and start, and so that was sort of the first step, and then I thought, well, what am I going to do? The only thing that really scares me is starting my own business. So I just thought, well, what have I got at some sort of a competitive advantage about? The last meeting I had in Miami was sitting with our agency, and there's this young dude with a arm tattoo and waistcoat on, sort of slicked over here, and I remember he pulled out like a hand cream, woman's hand cream in the thing, and kept putting his hand cream on. I was thinking, it's weird, flew home on the plane, and the whole way home I was thinking, I use moisturiser, and not many guys use moisturiser. And the reason I use moisturiser is because of cricket, because they're in the sun all the time.
Yep.
I remember I discovered oil of Olay. My mother had this pink pot of oil of Olay. I remember nearly getting caught when I was about 20 playing for Otago when I was at uni. I was playing, and Ken Rutherford, who I in my head was this really old man, but he must have been like 32, and he's a bat thrower and a bit of a tantrum thrower. So we'd been fielding all day, and at Carisbrook, the old stands, you couldn't see the pitch. So I was up in the dressing room having bowled, and Ken gets out early. So after a long day, anyway, had my shower and I'm putting my moisturiser on after the shower. Just as the dressing room door swings open, his bat goes flying across the room, and Ken just takes one look at me as I'm sort of mid-downstroke on this moisturiser application, and he's like, looks at me, and I'm like, oh no, this is going to be so bad. And he just goes, why are you putting sunscreen on at this time of day? In this really angry voice, and I was like, oh yeah, never be too safe, Ken. But it was so far out of his frame of reference that you could put moisturiser on, that Kiwi back then, that it was like it wasn't even a possibility. So I got away with it. But I remember that those sort of thoughts and those challenges I had with using it, I thought, well, those are all relevant to why men aren't using it now. And so I thought, well, shit, there's an opportunity here, to create something that if Ken Rutherford did catch me using it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't be embarrassing. And so I started thinking about those things. And then I thought, well, my granddad used to have all these Rawley's creams and pots and lotions, which I thought were cool. I remember finding them. And I thought, well, maybe if I make something like a bit more old school that I'd like to collect, it might be a thing.
And to state the obvious, we're talking men's skincare fundamentally. Do you think, just listening to you then, were you a trailblazer? I'm not trying to take the mickey here. I'm just trying. Well, because was there not a lot going on? Do you think?
I think that I was.
And and in a way, did you create a market?
I think I was practical first. So back when just using it because you'd get stuck in an oyster in Christchurch, I just thought I'd feel better if I used moisturiser afterwards, and that was just totally practical. In terms of starting the brand, I think I just. By that stage, there was a term metrosexual, which was floating around. If you guys, the Gen
Are you a
Zers out there-
metrosexual?
Well, no, I hated that term. See, that was the thing. It was like, it just felt icky, right? It didn't feel right. It's like, what is metrosexual? It doesn't. I'm just a guy, and I like to not feel like my skin's feeling good. That's all. That's not. What does that equate to? I like playing sport and all sorts of things. Sort of.
Do you think that's still there? Is there still a real men don't wear?
No, I think that's completely broken down. No,
Yes.
I think now
It's next level now. We need to, getting rid of every piece of body hair on their face and doing this, that, and 17 other things.
Yeah, totally. And I actually, weirdly enough, I think men our age, like, were the first to adopt Triumph and Disaster. So I'm talking 10 years ago now, but wives and partners would buy it for their husbands or boyfriends or whatever, and you'd get all these emails from like builders or farmers, and they go, my wife just paid $60 for a blimmin' some moisturiser, and then you get this grumpy sort of reading email, and then in the end it'd go, but I love it, now I need a new pot, where do I go?
And today you're big, right? It's my sense of it. It's quite a big company.
Oh well, no, we're still we're still what you'd call a small business enterprise, but we've got distributors in Germany, we've got one in UK, one in the US, one in Canada, one in Australia. So, and then we've got our own business where we go direct here, and we're online. So we've got 5 websites. So
What's some of your fancy stores you're in?
Yeah, so we've Selfridges in the UK. We've been in Nordstrom. We're not in there at the moment actually, but COVID has sort of hit a few different things. So in the US, but we were in like things like Holt Renfrew in Canada, and Smith and Co's in New Zealand, and Farmers, and Barker's menswear, things like that. So there's some really good sort of stores with really great people selling it and understanding it, and sort of those over time. I think what you realise is, those are not just retail accounts; they're sort of partners. And if you don't treat them that way, you come and go. And so I think that's been a big learning over time. Is getting a store is one thing, staying in there and making it work and keeping that relationship healthy is a whole nother thing.
And I'm not suggesting you wouldn't be, but be honest, have a think about this. Are you working hard, going at it, still trying to grow and grow and grow, or have you got middle age and you're kind of just cruising and it's all right, and you do enough to do well enough, but that's where do you think you're at?
I have to. I think middle-aged is a real thing, but my ambition to complete this business is still there, and it drives me along. And I think the 2 years of COVID, and now the challenging headwinds right now, it's a very stimulating time to be owning a business. Like, there are no certainties ahead, and as tough and stressful as what it is and has been for 2 years, and is going to be at least for another 12 months, I'm finding myself super stimulated at the moment and trying to make sure that my business survives and thrives coming out of it. Ultimately, I'd love to sell my business, build it up and sell it and make some money. That would be the tick of success at the end of it.
Well, that's Kiwi's disease, isn't it? Yeah. So we need to be foreign owned, and you've got the boat, the batch, and the beamer, and you're okay. But what have you done for New Zealand, Dion?
Yeah, I know. Well, that will be levelled. I don't mind having that levelled. If that was to happen, I'll take that criticism.
Where would the batch be?
Northland. I'm a Northland boy.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, no, I can't even bring myself to go to the Coromandel anymore. So,
does it feel like betrayal?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I'm that in reverse.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
To me, it actually has to be the Coromandel.
No, I can't even go. Yeah, just what's the beaches on this west coast? Piha North basically is and both sides.
Yeah, I don't territory.
mind. For a while, I even felt like I was cheating if I went to the east coast of Northland, but I've got over that. So
yes,
yeah.
You are married to Bernice Meni. Now, she's of course also a household name, a netballing great. How'd you get together? And I suppose my question really that I'm interested in is, presumably what's going on here is it takes one to know one, right? You both had this unique experience of being elite sports people with profile and pressure. I mean, I presume that's how you met, and that's what kept you to, hopefully there was some chemistry, but
Yeah. I mean, we met in 1999. I'd come home from India injured again, so I was feeling down in the dumps. I think it was my 28th birthday, and I was out with my niece and my sister, so I was having a real hellraiser, and I ran into a mate who owned a restaurant, and he was like, looked at me and he's like, "Oh mate, we got to do something better. Come to my restaurant for dinner." So I was like, "Okay." So we went around to this restaurant. And we got sat about 2 tables away from Bernice and a few other netballers who were having a debrief after they'd lost the world champs in '99, which of course none of which I knew. But it was one of those awkward things where someone that you knew but you didn't know was sitting very close to where you were, and obviously we were looking across and sort of seeing not flirting per se, but just that awkward sort of thing. So to break the ice, in the end, I got up and got a tray of tequila and walked over and said, "Oh, hard luck for world champs, girls," and I put the tequila down on the table. And as Bernie tells the story, one of the girls goes, Bernie thought in her head, "I think that's Dion Nash," and then one of the other girls goes, "That's Dion Nash," and then the third one goes, "Who?" And so apparently I made a limited splash, but the tequila went down well anyway.
It's a sad truth. It's true for my relationship, my wife as well. Alcohol seems to always be involved at the start. It's just one of those sort of things. do you two still do? I mean, do you do sport together, or is that not really?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, no, we definitely very active. Bernie's super competitive, as you can imagine. So mainly the sports now tend to be whatever the kids are playing. So we do a fair bit of football and basketball's the big one because all three kids play basketball. So that quite often can end in tears actually because depending. So, but what we're being slowly overrun is what's happening. So we're losing more and more. And I used to win all the sprints, but I'm now finding I'm ending up about fourth. Which is
is one of you the more complete sports person?
Tough question. Shows.
There's no right answer here.
No,
right?
and look, I would answer that by I implore my children to have my wife's grace in winning and losing, and maybe
your sheer ambition and aggression.
That's right, maybe. But no, I mean, Bernie's an awesome athlete, like she really is. So I would never say that I was, more athletic. But no, Bernie was. I think she still, well, until recently anyway, held quite a few Canterbury records in athletics and things. So.
Oh no, look, and as I say at the time, it was massive. And you've got three kids. We've talked a bit about their sports. I mean, one other thing I was interested in, I presume that you two there, sports is in the genes. I mean, if you just take Bernie, right? Her mum was Commonwealth game athlete, dad was basketballer, brother's, a discus athlete. So, like on that basis, I suppose what I'm saying without putting pressure, maybe your kids shouldn't listen to this podcast, not that they would anyway, but you never know. They might be generally famous sort of regular time listeners. Is it fundamentally now in the genes and it's kind of like natural nurture? You guys actually don't need to do anything. They are just, given your genes, going to be great sports people.
No, they are all coordinated and they all have an instinct for sport, no question. I think it comes back to what do they want to do. I think they are actually all quite academic, which is quite possibly an issue. I think
in terms of their sportsmanship, it will interfere.
Yes, it will. It definitely will. And I think there's a bloody mindedness that needs to come with almost a one-dimensional nature that you need to really cut through in sport, I think. Which
you basically saying you've been too good a parents.
Oh,
and given them a balance.
I wasn't reading it that way, but yeah.
I mean? Like,
am I still flattering myself? Possibly.
No, I mean just that they've had a nice family, balanced background.
I think
they don't have chips on their shoulder. They're not going out there, I'm going to score a 6.
I definitely think they don't have chips on their shoulder, which I did hugely. And I think that sometimes worries me. Do you need a chip on your shoulder to be successful in sport? Possibly not. You definitely need ambition. Is being well-rounded and brought up in a comfortable environment and an asset, or I can only speak. I think that it can make. I always say to my kids, there's some hungry young kid from Northland out there who's going to chop you up, if you don't play hard and get involved here. So I think that probably internally that's how, because that was my upbringing, and I think that drive and toughness quite often does come from provincial and slightly not hard upbringing per se, but maybe more independent style upbringings.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when you live in a big city and you go to good local
lose
schools,
a bit of that.
Well, you're nurtured. You get driven. When it's raining, your mum drives you to school.
Yes.
All those types of
Not
things.
in our day. We walked with bare feet. We were lucky if we had rocks in our lunch boxes for lunch.
The only thing
I
maybe
got a Big Ben pie once a year. Once a year.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it was gone in about 8 seconds.
Yeah. Did you peel the top off and put potato chips in the top? And
that'd be quite good though.
They were quite, there's a way to eat certain pies. Big Bens, I think, quite often need a little bit extra put in them.
I haven't even checked this, but I presume Bernie is Samoan.
Yes. Yeah.
Give me run. So what I know is you both grew up Catholic, and that's why you're such big families. My parents weren't Catholic, so I don't know what their excuse was. And I'm what I'm interested. So it's cross cultural, and was it all right you being a Palangi in the Mene whānau, or was
totally. Totally.
Kiriti at Christmas, that's what it's called, isn't it?
yeah, Christmassy. I mean, I think that maybe if anything, I remember there's a gifting of the mats, the fine mats, which happened, and I remember my father making some sort of awkward speech that pushed up against the idea of marrying someone from a different race, and I remember he was trying his best not to come across as a white sort of like middle class male, but that's exactly what he achieved.
He was the greatest white middle class male of his generation.
But I remember, but there was definitely no question that it was a good thing and it was all good. But I mean, I think there was definitely learnings from more probably from my family side, I think, and still I'm the closest to probably understanding Samoan culture. With my brothers and sisters don't probably understand some of it. I think they were very respectful of it. But even me marrying Bernie, I will never fully understand Samoan culture because I'm just not brought up in it. We don't live in it, and so.
Where'd she grow up? In Auckland.
She's Christchurch.
Right.
Yeah. So and she would probably say that growing up in Christchurch, she's one step. They went back to the islands often, but she was probably one step removed as well. So, but no, that's great. We love it.
Fantastic. Quick fire. So these things in my very thorough due diligence on you, these are some things I'm interested in. When are the Camel Toes playing next?
Camel Toes is my that's my band that with Jeff Ross and a few other mates. Craig Innes.
Not an entirely appropriate name.
Well, actually, we played. Our biggest gig was at the Town Hall when there's a 50 years anniversary of the Beatles, and they wouldn't print the name of our band on the flyers to promote this Town Hall gig. Because there's all these other bands, Crowded, Split End, no,
never heard of them.
Anyway, they were on there, but so they wouldn't print the name, so they called us the Jeff Ross Experience. So you can imagine that was the start.
What does he play?
Oh, exactly. A very good question. But,
and you're a guitarist.
Yeah, and so is Jeff apparently, although there's a little bit of debate about whose amp should be loudest. And Craig Innes, Posty Innes on the drums. So there's no greater feeling in the world than turning around and seeing the All Black second five dashing away on the drums behind you. So we don't play much anymore, but it was fun.
The genre, I feel is sort of I saw some post-punk.
Yeah, no, I think we wrote a press release, Simon. So when and I think on there it was like post-punk, pre-new romantic psychedelic rock. I think something like those, somewhere along those lines, which gave us enough scope to really screw up the songs that we were
comeback tour.
Maybe
Camel Toes comeback. Tell me about Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison, well, it's a very sad story. Jim Morrison was our cat of 16 years, and he literally passed away last month. And he is a very, very much a part of the family, and the coolest cat of all time. But he passed away. This is the manner in which he came in. We knew he was sort of getting old, and he came into a lounge. We were all sitting upstairs one day, and he not that long ago, and he walked around. He sat on everyone's lap. My oldest son said, "Dad, Jim's not well. There's something not right." And Jim jumped down onto the floor in the middle of us. My oldest son lay beside him for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, he was dead. Oh. And he died right in front of us with the whole family there, and he'd gone around everyone, almost like he was saying goodbye. So it was very traumatic.
I think they do. I think they know. It's quite amazing. Get a new cat or?
No, we can't bring ourselves to even discuss that.
There is only one.
Yeah, there's only one Jim Morrison. Yeah.
What's the Queen Street Club, cricket club?
So that's Queen Street Cricket Club is a group of guys who have set up. It's a charity, really. So they raise money. For every black capper gets a duck. The members put in X amount of money for each duck. So
right.
And then they raise it, and then they give it back to good causes, schools.
And you're part of that.
I'm a member of the club. Probably added a bit of money as well through getting ducks in my time. But they have been very good to us because they helped me raise some money to build some nets at my son's school. So we had to nets don't come cheap these days. So I took it on myself to raise some money to get these new nets, and then they had to go out and sort of beg, steal and borrow. But Queen Street Cricket Club were just amazing. And they just came on board and backed it, basically.
I'm going to wrap up with some questions I ask every guest. We call it general knowledge. What's the best night out you've ever had?
The best night out, going to, well, apart from when I met my wife,
yes,
the other one would be the Pearl Jam concert in 1993 or 2 at the Super Top. It was the first time they came out here.
I was there.
It was amazing.
Is this where, let me just, but it would have been there because it would have been about the time when I would have gone because it was still at school.
Yeah.
Was Neil Finn part of that?
Yeah, they came out and played. Yeah.
No, I was there. Neil and fantastic.
Neil and Tim Finn.
But so why was that so good?
I was just started playing for New Zealand, so I had just a little bit. But I remember cutting through with no shirt on, getting right to the front of the mosh pit, just as Eddie Vedder took this big slug of red wine out of this sort of cask and sprayed it all over the crowd, and I managed to get some in my mouth, and I was thinking, yes, I've made it.
Like sort of,
and so it was like one of those
sounds like
times
a holy experience.
It was.
I remember the Chili Peppers around that time, and they had fire coming out of their helmets. I mean, that was an amazing, the Blood Sugar Sex Magic concert. Anyway, not to name drop too much. Actually, Nirvana at the town hall.
Did you go?
How amazing is that?
Did you go to Nirvana
at the town hall?
You're joking.
Very young. Anyway,
that was just before they were just about to blow up. Right then, that was their last tour before they became massive.
Yeah, I was young lad, so I'm just trying to sort of emphasise how cool I am because these people who are under 20 in the room, right? they will be impressed by that. What's the best advice you've been given, and who gave it to you?
Be your own best coach, oh my gosh, Harold Whitcomb was the man, and he was Martin Crowe's batting coach, or an old guy who'd coached Martin Crowe. And I met him when I was about 14 or 15, and I'd come down from Northland, and I had this 1 hour session with this guy who was considered this guru in Eden Park. And I remember it really clearly at the end of this sort of hour with this guru, which was pretty good. And he said you can play. There's no dramas there, but all I can say to you is, in the end, be your own best coach. And he said lots of people will give you advice through your career, but the only person that's there throughout is you, and you need to be able to choose which advice to keep and which advice to throw away. And I've always remembered it, and I think it's truer now than ever, in every aspect.
Absolutely. And look, I do like to end on a serious note. If you could be any animal, what would it be and why?
I'd like to be, I don't know, cats are pretty cool. Jim Morrison reincarnated, or a wolf. I think I'd need to have some sort of predatory nature to
wolf
myself.
Spirit. I see that in you.
So yeah, I think wolves are slightly misunderstood as well, aren't they?
Exactly. Dion Nash, it has been a great pleasure. You're not just a famous cricketer. You're a skincare guru, possibly a metrosexual, a renaissance man, and it's been great to have you on the show. You've been listening to Generally Famous. There's a new episode every Wednesday. You can listen to them all at stuff.co.nz/generallyfamous, wherever you get your podcasts. In fact, if you follow us on Apple or Spotify, any of the podcast apps, in fact, you'll get the latest episode automatically. Go on, it's really quick and easy. I'd love to hear from you. Send your feedback to generallyfamous@stuff.co.nz. Thanks to my producers, Chris Reed and Jen Black. I'm Simon Bridges. I really appreciate you listening. Generally Famous was proudly brought to you by Oppo's first flip phone, the Find N2 Flip. Generally famous for looking great and folding small to fit anywhere.
The Oppo Find N2 Flip looks strikingly flawless. No bumps, no interruptions, no compromises. Creating the perfect flat screen folding phone wasn't easy, and at Oppo we challenged ourselves constantly. Can we make it lighter, more durable, more usable but with a battery that can last all day? Like a flagship smartphone with an innovative foldable experience. The answer to everything had to be yes. The Oppo Find N2 Flip smartphone. For a sneak preview, go to oppo.com/nz.